Work is meant to be a place of routine, safety, and stability, but at times it becomes the setting for unthinkable tragedy. From gruesome accidents to chilling mysteries, these 5 incidents are among the most unsettling in history, and their haunting nature will stay with you forever. It was June 2nd, 2022, in Mapleton, Illinois. The morning sun cast long shadows over the Caterpillar foundry, where workers moved through the massive industrial complex, their bodies already coated in a thin layer of metallic dust. Inside, the air was thick with heat and the scent of burning iron. Molten metal glowed in open crucibles, their contents heated to 2,600 degrees Fahrenheit, ready to be cast into heavy machinery components. The facility, one of the largest foundries in the country, could melt up to 1,000 tons of iron daily. The work was dangerous, requiring extensive training, but despite the scale of the operation, safety measures were not always in place. Stephen Dirks, 39, had been at the foundry for only 9 days. A father of 3, he lived in Peoria, Illinois, with his partner Jessica Sutter and their daughters, aged 4, 5, and 12. He had taken the job after a period of unemployment, hoping to provide a stable future for his family. The foundry was demanding, but he was willing to endure the long hours and extreme conditions. He trusted that the risks were manageable, unaware that this very trust would soon cost him everything. That fateful day at 9:20 a.m., Stephen was assigned a routine task, taking a sample of molten iron. The process required precision. A crucible, filled to the brim with liquid metal, sat before him. The metal swirled and shimmered, its temperature capable of reducing solid matter to nothing in seconds. There were no guardrails around the platform where he worked, only open space and the edge of the crucible, just inches away. Then something went wrong. Stephen took a step, but his foot did not find stable ground. He tripped, his balance lost in an instant. With no barrier to stop him, he fell forward. His upper body plunged into the crucible. The reaction was immediate. The extreme heat vaporized flesh and bone on contact, consuming Stephen in a fraction of a second. The crucible hissed violently as his body was absorbed into the molten mass. By the time his co-workers realized what had happened, it was already too late. The foundry fell silent. Workers stared, frozen by the horror of what they had just witnessed. A call was made to the Peoria County Coroner's office. By 10 a.m., authorities arrived, but there was little to recover. The facility was evacuated, and work was halted for the day. Hours later, after the contents of the crucible had cooled, the coroner's team sifted through the remains. They found only fragments, small pieces of bone, the last traces of Stephen Dirks. The official cause of death was listed as thermal annihilation. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration launched an investigation. Inspectors noted the absence of guardrails and protective barriers at the workstation. The foundry, with its massive output, required careful safety precautions, but hazards were present. Just 6 months earlier, another worker, Scott Adams, had also died at the facility. Employees later voiced their concerns, describing grueling conditions and safety lapses that had been ignored. Despite this, Caterpillar maintained that worker safety was a priority. OSHA determined that Stephen's death could have been prevented. The agency issued a fine of $145,027, the maximum allowed under federal law. However, no criminal charges were filed. Some criticized the decision, arguing that smaller companies often face harsher consequences, while large corporations like Caterpillar avoid serious legal repercussions. Jessica Sutter grieved in silence. Her daughters would never see their father again. She held Caterpillar responsible, believing that a simple safety measure could have saved Stephen's life. In the weeks that followed, she waited for answers, for accountability, but none came. Caterpillar did not offer assistance to her or her children. The foundry continued to operate. The furnaces remained lit, and the molten iron flowed as it always had. The tragedy of Stephen Dirks faded into the machinery of industry, reduced to a fine layer of dust, settling unnoticed on the factory floor. It was October 20th, 2017 in Stary Oskol, Russia. The Slavyanka confectionery factory hummed with the noise of large industrial mixers and the clatter of workers carrying out their daily tasks. Among them was 36-year-old Natalia Nemets, a dedicated mother of a 10-year-old son named Ivan. For Natalia, the factory was more than just a job. It was a source of pride, a place where she could support her family and provide for her son. But that day, something went terribly wrong. Natalia was assigned the task of cleaning one of the factory's large mixers, a crucial piece of equipment in the caramel production line. The tank, over 6 feet deep and wide, was filled with thick, boiling caramel. She had done the task countless times before, but this time, the situation turned tragic. At some point during her work, Natalia fell into the open tank. The heat of the caramel was intense, over 200 degrees Fahrenheit, and it was designed to stir with rotating blades, making escape impossible. Worse still, the flow of the caramel, which had been momentarily shut off, began to surge again, filling the tank. By the time her colleagues noticed her absence, it was too late. There were no cries for help, no sound at all. The only indication of her fate was the sight of her legs sticking out from the tank, the rest of her body submerged in the thick molten liquid. The factory went quiet. Workers stood frozen, their eyes fixed on the horror before them. Despite their panic, nothing could be done. Natalia had been boiled alive, her death instantaneous, caused by the extreme temperature of the caramel. The blades in the tank ensured that there was no chance for survival, making it a freak accident no one could have anticipated. News of the incident spread quickly, but management immediately moved to suppress any details from leaking. Workers were threatened with dismissal if they spoke out, and any attempt at communication was swiftly blocked. However, the truth eventually surfaced. A local paper, Komsomolskaya Pravda, reported the horrific accident, which was followed by a formal investigation. The investigation revealed disturbing details. It wasn't the first fatal incident at the factory. This was the third such event within a year, raising questions about safety practices at Slavianka. Workers speculated that Natalia might have fainted from the overwhelming heat before falling into the tank. Others believed it was a simple accident. She stumbled and fell in without warning. Either way, the lack of proper safety measures in place became glaringly obvious. Even more troubling was the factory's response. Despite the horror of the accident, the management sought to cover up what had happened. Employees were warned to remain silent, and those who dared to speak risked losing their jobs. The callous disregard for safety and the attempted concealment of the tragedy only deepened the community's outrage. As the investigation unfolded, it became clear that this was not a one-off incident. The factory had a troubling history of accidents, and management had failed to ensure the well-being of its workers. Natalia's death was a grim reminder that industrial workplaces can be dangerous when corners are cut. Her son Ivan, now orphaned, was taken in by Natalia's sister, Yulia. The factory, the authorities, and the town would have to come to terms with the fact that such a simple task, cleaning a tank, could lead to a death so senseless and tragic. In the wake of her passing, the town of Stary Oskol was left to grapple with the realization that something as routine as cleaning a mixer could result in the loss of a mother and a life. It was September 30th, 1999, in the quiet town of Tokamura, Japan. Hisashi Uchi, Masato Shinohara, and Yutaka Yokokawa, workers at the local nuclear fuel plant, unknowingly triggered a catastrophic chain reaction that would alter their lives and the lives of many others forever. The events of the day seemed deceptively routine. 35-year-old Hisashi Uchi and 40-year-old Masato Shinohara, both technicians working at the plant, were preparing uranium-enriched fuel at the small facility in northeast Japan. Yutaka Yokokawa, their supervisor, was observing the procedure from his desk behind a wall about 14 feet away. The task itself was risky. The uranium they were handling was enriched to 18.8%, far higher than the usual 3 to 5%. Despite the potential dangers, the three workers had received no specialized training, and safety protocols were largely ignored. At 10:35 a.m., Uchi was leaning over the precipitation tank holding a funnel as Shinohara poured uranium oxide into the tank from a stainless steel bucket. This method had been adopted by the company, but without consulting safety specialists. Soon, the tank became overloaded with 35 pounds of uranium, far exceeding the 5-pound limit. Then, without warning, the tank emitted a blinding blue-white flash, signaling the start of a nuclear chain reaction. The men froze in shock for a moment, then fled the facility. The radiation began to spread almost immediately. Uchi and Shinohara began to feel nauseous, disoriented, and their skin burned with a searing pain. Though Yokokawa was farther away, he too began to feel the effects. The plant was evacuated, but radiation continued to leak, spreading into the surrounding area. Emergency protocols were slow to take effect. Hours passed before authorities evacuated 161 residents living nearby, while thousands were told to stay indoors. By the time the reaction was halted 20 hours later, over 10,000 people were tested for radiation exposure, with hundreds suffering from dangerous levels of contamination. For Uchi, the nightmare was just beginning. Standing closest to the tank, he absorbed a devastating dose of 17 sieverts of radiation, a dose far above the fatal threshold of 4 or 5. His body was burned beyond recognition, his skin began to peel away, and his immune system collapsed. Despite the doctor's efforts with experimental stem cell transplants, skin grafts, and blood transfusions, nothing could stop the damage. Uchi's suffering was unimaginable. For 83 days, his organs failed one after another, and his body disintegrated before the eyes of medical staff and his family. Despite his condition, his family begged doctors to keep resuscitating him every time his heart stopped. The ethical questions surrounding his prolonged suffering were debated, but he ultimately passed away on December 21, 1999. Shinohara, who had been standing beside Uchi during the accident, suffered a similar fate. Although exposed to a slightly lower dose of 10 sieverts, his body began to fail. Radiation destroyed his organs, and after months of battling the inevitable, he succumbed to multiple organ failure in April 2000, nearly 7 months after the incident. Yokokawa, further from the explosion, was exposed to a lower dose of 3 sieverts. Though he survived, he spent months hospitalized, battling radiation sickness. Upon his recovery, he was charged with negligence, alongside 5 other employees, for their roles in the disaster. The plant's owners were forced to pay millions in compensation to local residents, many of whom had been exposed to excess radiation. In total, over 10,000 people were tested for radiation exposure. The disaster led to a nationwide re-evaluation of Japan's nuclear safety regulations, leaving a lasting mark on the industry. It was October 11, 2012, in Santa Fe Springs, California. Jose Molina, a 62-year-old worker at Bumblebee Foods, began his shift like any other. His job required him to oversee the preparation of pallets of canned tuna for processing. Jose was well known for his reliability and commitment to his role at the plant, having spent years working there. On that day, he followed his usual routine without any indication that things would soon take a tragic turn. The plant's work environment was hazardous. It involved handling large industrial ovens, each one about 35 feet long, capable of reaching temperatures of 270 degrees Fahrenheit. These ovens were crucial to the tuna processing operation, but they were also dangerous. For Jose, the ovens were a regular part of his work. On this day, however, he unknowingly became part of a deadly mistake. At some point during the morning, Jose entered one of the ovens for routine maintenance. While he was inside, one of his co-workers, thinking Jose was on break, began loading the oven with 6 tons of canned tuna. The oven doors were sealed, and the machine was activated. The temperature inside started to rise, and by the time anyone realized Jose was missing, it was already too late. A search ensued, but it wasn't until 2 hours later that they discovered his body inside the now-cooled oven. The tragedy, though sudden and harrowing, revealed a disturbing lack of safety measures at Bumblebee Foods. Investigations uncovered significant lapses in the plant's protocols. There were no checks in place to ensure that the ovens were empty before they were loaded or turned on. No system was in place to monitor when workers entered these dangerous areas, and there were no safeguards, such as designated spotters or an escape mechanism. The absence of such basic measures proved to be fatal for Jose. Deputy District Attorney Hoon Chun, who oversaw the case, described the incident as one of the most heartbreaking he had encountered. He emphasized the unimaginable suffering Jose may have endured in those final moments. This case underscored the need for accountability and workplace safety. Bumblebee Foods faced serious legal consequences. The company was found guilty of breaching occupational safety standards and pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor for failing to establish effective safety protocols. As a result, Bumblebee Foods was ordered to pay a historic $6 million settlement, the largest penalty ever imposed in California for a workplace safety violation. This fine reflected the severity of the incident, far surpassing standard penalties. 2 key employees, Plant Operations Director Angel Rodriguez and former safety manager Saul Flores, also faced penalties. Rodriguez, who pled guilty to a misdemeanor charge, was sentenced to community service and fined around $1,000. Flores, however, pled guilty to a felony charge and was sentenced to probation, along with fines of approximately $119,000. Both men had initially faced more severe penalties, including potential prison time. The company's response included a commitment to safety reforms. Bumblebee Foods invested $3 million to upgrade their ovens and prevent similar accidents from occurring. Additional employee training programs were implemented to ensure workers understood and followed the necessary safety protocols. These efforts were a direct response to the glaring safety oversights that had led to Jose's death. Jose's family was awarded $1.5 million as part of the settlement. While the amount could never replace what was lost, it provided some small measure of relief. His wife, children, and colleagues were left to mourn a tragedy that could have been prevented with better oversight. The incident also revealed that Bumblebee Foods had been previously cited by California's Occupational Safety and Health Administration for inadequate safety measures. In 2011, the company had been fined $74,000 for these issues, but the necessary changes were never made in time to prevent Jose's death. In the aftermath, Bumblebee Foods issued a statement expressing its commitment to prioritizing safety. They acknowledged Jose's death as a painful reminder of the importance of maintaining strict safety protocols in the workplace. It was June 15, 2024, in Zako, Iraq's Duhok Governorate District. The morning in this bustling town, known for its landmarks like Dalal Bridge and Zako Castle, began like any other. Isa Ismail, a 25-year-old chef and father of 3, was preparing for a busy day at the Hazel Hall. With 8 years of experience, Isa had gained a reputation for his culinary skills, particularly in catering for weddings and events that marked significant moments in the community. On that day, Isa was focused on preparing a large pot of chicken soup, a dish often served at gatherings. The kitchen, a familiar place of organized chaos, hummed with activity as Isa worked alongside his co-workers. But as he moved across the busy space, a slip on the floor turned into a catastrophic accident. Isa fell directly into the large pot of boiling soup that had been placed on the ground. The liquid, scalding at over 200 degrees Fahrenheit, engulfed his body, causing burns over 70% of his skin. Despite the excruciating pain, Isa pulled himself from the pot, collapsing onto the cold kitchen floor. His co-workers rushed to his aid, calling for an ambulance and doing their best to comfort him in the panic. The severity of his injuries left them helpless, and Isa was quickly transported to a hospital 40 miles away in Duhok. There, doctors worked tirelessly to treat the critical burns, but the extent of the damage was too severe to reverse. After 5 days in intensive care, Isa succumbed to his injuries on June 21, 2024. The news of Isa's death shocked his family and community. His father, Muhammad Ismail, and his relative, Zervan Hosni, spoke out, sharing their grief and describing Isa as a loving father who worked tirelessly to provide for his family. Despite earning only 25,000 Iraqi dinars a day, around $17, Isa's dedication to his work had supported his wife and 3 children. His sudden passing left a financial and emotional gap that would be difficult to overcome. The tragedy sparked outrage across Iraqi media and social platforms, with many criticizing the lack of safety regulations in commercial kitchens. The common practice of placing large hot pots on the floor was seen as a significant risk, one that had ultimately led to Isa's death. This incident brought attention to the urgent need for improved safety measures in workplaces, particularly in kitchens where employees work under hazardous conditions. Zako, known for its landmarks and its position as a center of job opportunities in the Kurdistan Autonomous Region, had attracted many seeking work, but Isa's death revealed the dangers workers often face when safety protocols are either ignored or poorly enforced. His tragic accident highlighted the overlooked risks in industries that rely on routine tasks with little regard for worker safety. The incident also drew comparisons to other famous cases involving burns from hot liquids, such as the widely known case of Stella Liebeck, who sued McDonald's after suffering burns from a spilled cup of hot coffee. Both incidents underscored the hidden dangers of handling high-temperature substances and the need for better precautionary measures. Isa Ismail's death serves as a stark reminder of the risks involved in routine tasks when safety is neglected. His dedication to his work and his family's well-being made him a beloved figure in his community. His story continues to fuel conversations about improving workplace safety, with the hope that no one else will suffer the same fate. Thank you for watching as we uncovered the 5 most disturbing workplace deaths of all time. But what if tragedy struck in the wilderness, leaving people lost without a trace? In our next video, we explore the mysterious disappearances of hikers, people who vanished for years, only to be found in the most unexpected ways. Don't miss the haunting details of these real-life survival stories. You won't believe what happened next.